There are seasons in our lives in which we come and we find ourselves longing for clarity. We're searching for that peace, that sense of wholeness, that sense of, I need some help along the way. We need some discernment. And so often we turn to our therapists, our spiritual guide, our coaches, our career coaches, and we lean into their presence. And we don't go to them because we're broken. We don't go to them out of shame. No, we go to them because we know that it is in that relationship that we can be our best self. And yet we go and we have this pattern, and it's not anything unusual. It's our humanness. But we go and we start conversations so often, and we say, well, I want to tell you what's going on. And we start naming all of the things and all of the places and all the situations where someone has done something to us. That it's somebody else's fault, that it's somebody else's behavior, it's somebody else's situation, and they've made us this way. It's natural, we do that. But then there's something that happens, that when we become real, that when we sit and the longer we lean into their presence and the longer we linger, and the more we make room for the conversations that are happening, something very slight begins to happen. And somewhere along the way, the conversation moves from those and them and they to me. You see, it's the stresses of our lives. And in this process, the more we linger in these conversations, the more we make room for them to become all of that we are. Something that is hard happens, and it's a refinement. What begins to happen is we shift from they, them, their. We shift from what everybody did to us, and we suddenly see what our professionals would call the shadow sides of ourselves. The places in us that are not who we are truly meant to be. The places where our sense of communication, that's a gift, a strength. Our sense of wordsmithing has suddenly become a manipulation tool, a sense of holding and correcting. And instead of living into that gifting of communication, there is this switch, and we want to hold the power of words, and we want to tell everyone else how their words are not important. When we linger in those conversations, when we house and make room for what the person in front of us is saying, this process begins to happen, and we see that the places where we've always been organized, where we lend administrative, where we can say and help, that actually, because of the stresses in our lives, we've been living, and maybe we felt like we needed to control certain areas. And we see layer by layer that is revealed. Or maybe you have the gift. You've always been a person that raises the bar and walked with your head held high, but somehow the pressures and the season of life have pushed you into a corner. And in this process, you see that you're not raising the bar, but that there is judgment seeping from your bones, seeping out of your veins and into the world. Or you've always been a person and you've always been gifted with nurturing and standing with people and holding their secrets and confidence. and their stories and confidence, but somehow along the way, that has turned into you want to care for people so that you know what's going on, so that you feel important. And you share not out of concern, but you share out of gossip. But what happens is the longer we lean into these conversations, the more we are present, fully present with the person in front of us, the therapist, the spiritual guide, the career coach. What happens is there is a process called refinement. That's what Malachi is talking about. It's this refinement that ever so gently and painstakingly we are put into a place where we are uncomfortable. We are put into places where we don't want to go. It's like any metal, whether it's a metal or whether you have ceramic or whether it's glass that you're blowing, any time that it gets into that fire, there's a process of refinement. There's a process of melting away. And Malachi is saying, there's one coming that wants to melt away, that wants to make those sharp edges soft and smooth. Malachi is the last lone voice for generations, not just one or two, but whole generations. And he's saying that our God is one that is coming to refine us. And so today in this season, are we housing the Holy of Holy? Are we really making room for God to come into our lives and refine us? Because what happens in those conversations, the more we linger, the more we open ourselves, the sharper edges that we see in ourselves, what happens is when we sit in God's refinement, when we house the Holy of Holies, there is a very slight peace that begins to come. Because in those conversations, in that refinement, our sharp edges become soft and smooth again. We communicate out of collaboration. We communicate and organize for the best, not out of our own sense, not what we want, but what is best for our community. We're the ones that nurture, not out of gossip, not because we want somebody to notice all the good things that we're doing, but because we are behind the scenes and we become the mere presence of God in the hopeless world. We set the bar high, not to challenge, but to say, I believe in you. We can do this together. The moment that we make the decision to have these conversations, not just with our therapists, not just with our spiritual guides, but with God, the moment we begin to house the holy. Malachi says to us that there's going to be a process, and it is going to be painful. It is going to be rough. But God is going to refine every rough edge that we have. And when that happens, our souls are at peace. It's then that we can walk into conversations. It's then that we can walk into the world and be with our neighbor and be with our colleagues. And we are the ones that are the non-anxious presence. We are the ones that are comfortable in our own skin, not relying on what the world is going to tell us or what the world thinks of us. But the refinement helps us to be who God has already designed us to be. You see, Malachi is saying that God is coming. Are you going to house the holiness of God? Are you going to make room for these tough conversations where you can be refined? Because God is knocking. When we house the holy of holy and we become people who remind the world of hope and believe in the unbelievable. And when we bring and house God into every crevice of our lives, it's then that we become the peacemakers. But it starts when we sing, "Let there be peace with me." Refinement is not about somebody else. Refinement is about who we are and letting God's peace begin just with us. Are you going to house the holy this season? Are you going to be refined so that the peace in this world can truly begin with me? Let us pray.